Utah, not a top 15 team in 2024. 24/7 Sports seems to think so. Let's discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by James Peterson of ESPN 700. And it's that time of the year where we got a long time till even spring ball, feels like, because we're like a month away from that. We got an even longer time till September, James. So what are we going to talk about? Way too early top 25s. And when I said 24/7 Sports, no, I'm not talking about Ute Zone. Of course, I'm talking about the other part of 24/7, the national part. And this is one of their writers who put out a list. It's Brad Crawford, did his list of his way too early top 25 for the season. And he had Utah at 17, which I can understand having Utah outside of the top 10. I like to have Utah in the top 10 personally, but I just feel like them outside the top 15 is something I don't love personally. But how do you read it, James?
It's a little surprising given that they look like they're the favorites to win the Big 12 for sure. But you think about how many new teams the Big 10 added, and then SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma. There's a lot of competition out there for the top 15, top 20 teams in the nation. So it's a little surprising they're outside the 15. But if you look at the teams that they put ahead of them, there's probably only one or two that I kind of raise my eyebrows at. So true. There's a lot of legitimate teams this year with a chance to make the playoff and maybe make a deep run.
You're right in that, where if it's like, okay, like it's more so me, I'm like, Utah at 17, like I don't love that. But then when you do break it down team by team, you're like, okay, we can start like obviously the teams that'll for sure be ranked ahead of Utah: Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Ole Miss. I got no issue with too, of course. Alabama. I'm a little, is it okay if I say I'm a little skeptical on Michigan? Like, they should be better, but they lost so much last year. I think Jim Harbaugh's a really good, and I think they made the right hire in Moore. I think he's going to be a really good coach there, but 1 year dip, I think Utah's got a shot to be better than Michigan.
Yeah. Michigan lost a ton of talent, but you got to figure that they can reload and even guys that we had freshmen and transfers that maybe we haven't heard of as much should be really good for them. But yeah, that's one that, given the amount of talent they've lost, that's one that's interesting that they're in the top 10. I got to think that's kind of a nod towards them being the defending national champs, give them the benefit of the doubt. The fact that Moore is was not just an interim head coach last year. He was a head coach for 7 games last year, and they won every single one of them. Right? Yeah. Tells you that you got to have some trust in him as he takes over the team. But yeah, that's a little surprising that they're as high as they are, given how much talent they lost. One that kind of surprises me is Miami in the top 15.
Yes.
And I'll be honest, I haven't looked at the roster that they're bringing back, so maybe they just have that good of a roster that they're bringing in. But how many years have we been hearing that Miami might be back? And how many years has Mario Cristobal had a team that everyone thinks could make the playoff or could win a national championship, when he even win a conference championship? And how many of those years did those Mario Cristobal teams underachieve, right? And so not sure I trust Miami, even with whatever talent they might be bringing in, which admittedly I'm not that familiar with. But
Cam Ward, right? Like, you bring in Cam Ward, the former Washington State
right?
quarterback.
Cam Ward's a big deal.
But to your point as well, so was Tyler Van Dyke, like the last who was there as well. Like they've had talented quarterbacks, and there's another one on this list as well. To your point, Notre Dame's on this list too. I want to see these teams put together full seasons in which they go on to achieve the lofty expectations set for them. Miami hasn't done that under Cristobal. I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's a really good coach. Before I pick him to have a top 10 team, I want to see him actually do it too. I know they almost beat Ohio State, but they didn't beat Ohio State. They also had losses to Louisville, and they've had other issues as well. Like, it's just, and there's even other teams on this list too, where I look at a Missouri and I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, this is where scheduling also comes into a factor, where I look at, like, Missouri has to go through the SEC versus Utah has to go through the Big 12. Like, that's where I like Utah's chances better to make it through that type of a grind too. And the team to round out the top 10, Miami was 12, mentioned Notre Dame already too, like Penn State at 10 as well. I'm fine with them, their inclusion in that spot too. But Tennessee, I mean, I feel like Tennessee last year, how many times did we talk about them being over Utah, James, when it felt like it wasn't deserved?
Yeah, Tennessee's an interesting one as well. I mean, a couple years ago, they were a legitimate top 10 team throughout the year, but that was with Hendon Hooker, who was in his fifth or sixth year. And they haven't had Hendon Hooker, or they didn't have him last year. They weren't near as good. They won't have a top quarterback like that this year, presumably, at least not at the caliber of Hendon Hooker going into this year. Maybe they prove us wrong, but that's one that I'm like, show me before you put him in the top 10, top 15 range. I'm with you on Notre Dame too. I mean, talk about a program that has a new quarterback every year. Yeah. When you don't have that consistency, it's hard to kind of bet on a team like that. And Marcus Freeman's been solid, but not great. And we all know that in South Bend, solid but not great isn't gonna cut it. So it's interesting that they've got him in the top 10 as well. I'm skeptical about Clemson too. Yeah, I mean, Dabo, ever since the transfer portal and NIL has become a thing, Dabo has been a very vocal opponent of those things, and his teams have suffered because of it, right? And so I'm not sure I buy them as a top 15 team. I wonder if Brad Crawford, who made this early top 25, is also, because I've seen other early top 25s have Utah a little lower than I thought they would, and a lot of that that I read into was, I wonder if people are still doubting Cam Rising and Brant Keithy's injuries, how effective they'll be coming off of these major injuries and missing an entire season. And in the case of Cam, I mean, this is a guy who's missed at least one game every year that he's been a starter the last 2 years. So it is fair to question a little bit and doubt whether he can play a whole season. But even with all of that, he and Brant missed an entire season, but you're talking about now for Brant, it'll be almost 2 years since his original injury. For Cam, it'll be about a year and a half since then. I think that it's safe to say that they're going to come in pretty healthy, and there's not really a ton of reason to doubt those guys' health until we see them maybe go down again, which, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But so I don't know that I buy that as a concern, as much of a concern as I've seen it maybe in these early top 25s.
I think the thing I love about Utah is the consistency. And I understand this is Locked On Utes. I do this 5 times a week. So obviously I'm going to have bias when I talk about the University of Utah. But I would rather give me the quarterback who played at a high level with his school. Like, I've seen this team with these core pieces, with that, like, they've won conference championships before, rather than give me shiny new Miami. Give me shiny new Notre Dame with Riley Leonard. Like, I just know what Utah is with Cam Rising healthy. And yes, I understand there's a little question of that, but like, he was at least good enough to throw on the pads and warm up this past year. I was at the UCLA game when he was out there in pads. So like, that's where, to me, he's going to be ready by the time August rolls around. And rolling with the rest of this, we did the top 12. You touched on Clemson. Cade Klubnik, like, let's just call it what it is. He's not the next, like, Trevor Lawrence, like, just all-time great Clemson quarterback, and they've struggled with recruiting. You're absolutely right there. Oklahoma, we just saw, the reason we're like, yep, Oregon is good is because we just saw Dylan Gabriel depart, or Oklahoma in part, to go to Oregon. So it's not like, and Oregon had their struggle. Oklahoma had some struggles and some losses last year too, where I'm like, I don't know about them. And LSU, the reason LSU was even top 15 last year was because of their quarterback and 2 wide receivers. Quarterback, of course, won Heisman. They're in the NFL. So I'm like, okay, you literally had to fire your defensive coordinator. So I'm not all about turning that around right away. Kansas State lost Will Howard. I know they did some nice things too, but that's where I just love the consistency of Utah. So to me, this is why I would have Utah in the top. Personally, I have Utah in the top 10. If you think it's crazy that I'm doing it, go ask Joe Klatt, one of the top analysts in the sport. He also has Utah in the top 10. And at least I feel like they should be in the top 15. But it's always fun to do and talk about these early lists as well. So even though we disagree with Brad Crawford, I appreciate him giving us some content to break down as well. And some content I'm eventually really excited to break down, James, is Big 12 Media Day. We officially have the date of that set. And I want to talk about what that means and what we can kind of expect at Utah's first ever Big 12 Media Day in one moment. But first, I want to talk to all of you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, in our friends at Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code VEGAS. That's VEGAS 100. They have great last-minute deals, all in price view from your seats, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have those last-minute tickets that allow you to get on flash deals, zone deals. You can even get a view from your seat so you know exactly what kind of a deal you are getting. That low price guarantee is massive once again, and it's just so easy to buy tickets. They even have the Gametime guarantee. It means you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Right now, all Gametime users get $100 off a big game ticket with code VEGAS. That's VEGAS 100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or you can use code LOCKED ON, capital LNO, no spaces, locked on, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I also want to talk to all of you about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at UCCU. Here are some exciting news from UCCU. UCCU has just elevated their checking account by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more, paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools. The elevated checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle security and financial benefits. The lifestyle benefits alone include cell phone protection, roadside assistance, telehealth with 24/7 access to licensed health professionals with zero copay and exclusive savings on travel, shopping, and dining. And elevated checking is free when you do any one of the following. Use your debit or credit card 15 times or more a month, or make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more to maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU elevated checking is only $6 a month. Visit uccu.com to open an elevated checking account online, or stop by any branch to open an account. UCCU, love where you bank. James, we got a date for Big 12 Media Days, and it's not going to be in AT&T Stadium this year. It's actually going to be in Vegas, where the conference championship game is going to be at, which I think is exciting. Media Days for the Big 12 is going to be July 9th and July 10th as well, as there's just so many teams and programs that you're only going to be able to fit so many in as well. But I love the location in Allegiant Stadium, nice and close. And it's just going to be fun to see all the coaches and the interviews and everyone together. I think it's going to be fun to see, and always fun to get the little different snippets and sound bites and everything. And you never know how crazy they can age, as well as Mark Harlan and Commissioner Kalyakoff were sitting on there like one day talking about how strong the pack was, and then 2 weeks later, Utah is leaving for the Big 12. And that was like right around July 10th or whatever the time frame of it was too. Maybe it was August, but
a week after that, Colorado left. That's what started everything, right? Like
crazy,
wild.
It's absolutely nuts. But what are you most looking forward to about Big 12 Media Day?
I mean, Media Day, everyone's undefeated. Everyone is happy and optimistic about their season, so that you always get some optimistic coaches and players, which makes for some good content there. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. being in Vegas, that's obviously a familiar sight for Utah. And at Allegiant Stadium, a stadium where they've won 2 Pac-12 championships, I think that'll be a fun one for Kyle Whittingham, and I'm guessing Cam Rising and being down there, that he's going to bring down there with him, and you know, maybe a Lander Barton. I don't know who the defensive player might be that they bring down, but yeah, that should be. I always look forward to hearing some of the other coaches, the ones that we, especially this conference, where we don't really get to, we haven't heard too much from them in these parts, being in a new conference. So I'm looking forward to hearing maybe some Mike Gundy sound bites. That
yes.
he's always good for a good one. Yeah, just kind of getting to know some of these other programs. But as far as Utah goes, it should be fun to see Kyle Whittingham and Cam Rising, or you know, presumably Cam Rising and whoever else they bring down there with them, kind of showcasing Utah as the strength of the conference, which it looks like they are.
I definitely agree. And, you know, speaking of fun Big 12 Media Day sound bites, Dion, I think he was sick or something last year. He missed the Pac-12 one.
He did.
So I'm excited to see him in his first Big 12 Media Day too, because we know that's going to provide some memorable sound bites as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. We did not see Dion last year. Yeah, I think he was under the weather. I don't exactly remember why he missed it. I think it was something like that, though. I wonder if it was because his AD and his institution said, "Hey, we're probably not going to be part of the conference next year, so I don't know if you need to be there." But yeah, that'll be fun. Hopefully, he makes the trip this time, and obviously Dion's fun to listen to, so that should be a good time seeing what he has to say.
Definitely will be. And as you mentioned too, it's just also that nice and fun. Like everyone's optimistic and happy about their season. It's a reminder how like when the season is closer as well, like you'll be July 10th. So most teams will be getting ready after that. Not long till they're starting up with fall camp. And we get to hear about all the progress they're making there. And I mean, after spring ball, it's the next time we hear from Coach Whittingham as well. It's always interesting to see which guys have had a good summer at workouts, what he's looking forward to about the year. That access is always something to be exciting and look forward to. But it's just the Big 12 Media Day will be the first time we see all of these. Well, yes, we've seen it on social media posts and everything, but like seeing all these teams and coaches and everyone in one place at one time, in some ways, it's going to be surreal, James. To like, we know it's happening. It's been happening for over 6 months now, but it is still crazy to think that like Utah and West Virginia play in the same conference now.
And UCF all the way out in Florida, and Cincinnati.
Houston, we play Houston this year, and it's a conference game. Like,
yeah.
What? That's so strange.
It's going to be the first time that we kind of see that all in the same place, and it'll be kind of a reminder to all of us just how weird college football has gotten, and kind of exciting. How exciting this Big 12 conference will be. I know that it's kind of being slept on nationally. And there's legitimate reasons for that. Obviously, the big national brands are not in the Big 12 right now, but still a ton of good programs. So it'll be a lot of fun to see these programs, and the Brett Yormark, who's is not light on flash and pizzazz, right? And trying to sell this conference, have the chance to really sell this conference for the first time, right? Well, I guess for the last time before the football season starts in a big showcase that is Media Day. So that should be a lot of fun.
It definitely will be. And, you make a really good point about the conference is strong overall. I think a lot of times on the show I'll come out about like, oh, Utah, I think Utah should and will win the Big 12 this year. And everyone's just like, oh, you think the Big 12 is awful and all these things like that. Like, I think this year, yes, Utah's an easier schedule because a lot of the teams they're playing in the Big 12 are down. TCU's not going to be down forever. Baylor's not going to be down forever. I think we've already talked about Kansas is in a good spot. Kansas State, while I think it hurts losing Will Howard, I know they have other things and options in place. And yes, I think Utah should be higher than them, but Kansas State does belong in the top 25 to me. They absolutely do in the top 20 too. I genuinely believe that too. There are tons of other teams I believe. And what's fun too is like Utah, we saw what Utah was able to ascend to in the Pac-12. Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, UCF, like which of these programs is going to be the next one to use this opportunity they've been given to springboard into a Power 4 conference now to turn themselves into a big brand and all of that. It's new rivalries. It's a lot of new stuff. And while I said this multiple times before, like, I'm sad to see the Pac-12 fall apart. This is also, there's a lot of good things that come from change in this regard too. And it's going to be a lot of new fun rivalries and memories. So be interesting to see what it looks like. And it's going to be fun to watch it all play out. And it all begins with Big 12 Media on July 9th and 10th. And you know that we will be covering that on Locked On Utes. But that is a long way away from now. So I have no idea why I just decided to tease it on this show that's going to come out in February. But it's just this time of year, James, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're looking for any content you can get. And when there's dates announced for big events like that, yeah, why not? let's preview it a little bit.
Exactly. But thankfully, the next topic is currently happening right now, because that is the Utah Gymnastics team. They continue to take care of business, and what an eventful meet they had against UCLA. Want to talk about all the craziness that unfolded there in one moment. But first, want to discuss with you all our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 a bet if your bet wins. Or excuse me, that's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And speaking of the NBA, the All-Star break is coming to a close. So Jazz games are going to be back in for you guys to get in and get some betting action on. Also, tons of fun other storylines around the NBA, right? Can the Celtics keep it going? Are the Denver Nuggets going to repeat? What's going to end up happening with the Miami Heat? There's a storyline for every team out there. And FanDuel has a bet for all of them. So make sure you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. James, the Utah Gymnastics program, currently ranked 4th, overcame an early deficit to take down number 8 UCLA. It was fantastic to watch them see it do so here. And as is listed in the Utah Athletics website too, the Red Rocks came back from a .425 deficit at the midway point after completing on bars and beam, and to earn the 197-300 to 196-975 victory. You know, Miley O'Keefe, McKenna Smith, Amelia Morgan, Grace McCollum, so many of the normal faces, Jaden Rucker contributing. And it's just always fun to watch this Utah Gymnastics team go out in there, get their win. And it's especially fun in games like this where you go to a top 10 team like UCLA and you get a win. And you know what else is crazy, James? They weren't the first team for Utah to go into UCLA and get a win that weekend.
Yeah, what a weekend it was at Pauley Pavilion for the Utes. I mean, the buzzer beater for the running Utes on Sunday, and you mentioned the comeback win at the night after on President's Day for the Red Rocks. I mean, not only is that huge because UCLA's ranked in the top 10, but also this has been a rivalry for decades now in gymnastics from before Utah was in the Pac-12. These have been two of the best, if not the two best, gymnastic programs in the West for a long time, and that rivalry has really enriched the Pac-12 gymnastics season in these last 12, 13 years that Utah's been a part of it. And so, yeah, it's not only big because that's a top 10 team, but that's probably the Red Rocks' biggest rival, so you know they were pumped after that one.
You know they were. It was a huge win for them, huge performance. Excited to see them continue to carry that momentum too. They got Stanford coming up this Friday at 6 p.m. back in the Huntsman Center, and I expect Utah to continue that momentum they have going for them, just like we continue to have good momentum on this podcast with great guests, because James joined us today. And James, if people want to hear more of your stuff, where should they head over to?
ESPN 700 Sports Saturday is my show, 10 to noon, 700 AM, 92.1 FM. If you're within the radio signal, if you're outside the state of Utah, download the ESPN 700 app. You can listen live that way. You can also listen to the podcast that way as well.
James, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. But we look forward to being back with you tomorrow, talking all things Utah football and Utah athletics.